This evening we'll talk about the second chapter from the book Sadhu Beware, and this chapter is on humility. And I thought I'd begin this talk on humility with a question to everyone of what will you do when one day people start coming up to you and touching your feet and asking you for blessings? Because one day this will happen, that it's each one of our destiny. And we might think, oh, God, no, not me. Or I hope we don't, but we might think, oh, yes, of course. Finally, everyone's understood who I am. And neither of these reactions really would be quite right. That today we're going to talk about humility and really about the ego, and that the only way out of this thing is transcendence. But we'll get to that more in a minute. That at the essence of who we are, that we are one with God, but we have to learn to understand that on a very deep level. And so it cannot be on an emotional level, that when people come to us for blessings, that we need to feel that it's God who's blessing them through us. It reminds me of the poem Samadhi, one line in there, that is knowing, knower, known as one. That we would have to feel that yes, God is within us, and that God is within that person, and God is even the act of giving the blessings. And this is a realization. It's why we're on this path of self-realization. It's something, yes, we talk about it this evening, and we're all here studying the scriptures and the teachings and learning from one another and doing, done. Eventually we will get there and we will understand these things. But I want to talk a little bit about this trickiness of humility, that one time Swamiji was trying to work on his humility and trying more and more to not see himself as the doer. And he said that one day he woke up and he found that he was becoming proud of his humility, which was the exact thing that, he's trying to get rid of this ego, and in it he finds that, oh, I'm doing such a great job of being humble. And humility really is a catch-22, but there are ways out of it. Another way of looking at this is that Master one time, someone was commenting to him, oh Master, how humble you are. And the Master said, Paramahansa Yogananda said, how can there be humility when there is no ego? I'm paraphrasing, it wasn't those exact words, but that's something very deep to think about, those words of how can there be humility if there is no ego. And that's really the only way that we can have true humility, is for us not to have any ego at all. And so we have to work on this, and we have to understand that ego is very tricky. As I was inviting people to come up this evening for the meditation in satsang, I was remarking to someone, oh, this will begin at 5:15, and they said I made it that way so that people come from the yoga class will have time to get here. The yoga class ends at 5 and they can come up by 5:15. And later on I was just thinking, it's very subtle ego, but okay, fine, make this thing start at 5:15. But even saying, oh, it's like the ego, it just creeps in and it just wants to say, see how smart I am? I thought this whole thing out, and as I made it at 5:15. But when you analyze and you start thinking about the ego, you see that really it's nonsense to even think that, oh, I'm so smart, because it's God who's doing everything. It's God in the last analysis who's putting each thought into our minds, and that's the thing that we want to become aware of. We want to understand that it's God who's doing everything. We want to understand that it's God who's even putting the thoughts in our minds. It's a good thing to think about these things and ask yourself, where do thoughts come from? And try and understand that, and it will help with attunement. It will help us try to be more in tune with the Guru, who is trying to put the good thoughts in our head, number one, but then number two, trying to bring us out of the whole thing altogether. Anyways, back on this topic of humility, I wanted to tell a story about Swamiji one time. He would tell this story often, and it's good to think about this story. That he gave a lecture one time, I believe it was in the Hollywood church, and afterwards someone came up to him and said, oh, that was a wonderful lecture. And so he said, oh, God is the doer. And she said, whoa, really? Whoa, I didn't know it was that good. I knew it was good, but I didn't know it was that good. And Swami would calmly tell this story, and it takes time, and you have to hear these stories again and again for it to sink in. But Swamiji was saying that, he wasn't the doer, that it was God who was talking through him. But that lady heard it as, your ego is God? Oh my God, you are God? Is God right in front of me, right here? Oh, I should be touching your feet. And Swami didn't mean it like that. That he just meant it that, yes, God was flowing through him very calmly. And so, anyway, that's the way that we want to get to, is to understand that it is God who's doing absolutely everything. And self-realization is so simple. It's that one realization that God is doing absolutely everything. The ego doesn't like that. It likes to say, but wait a minute, well, what if I just cough right now? Surely I did that. Well, no, of course God even put that thought into our minds that we're so silly and we have ego and we decide to cough right now and all of that. But if we really take it to the core of our being, that it's God who's doing everything, we're free. We have absolutely nothing to worry about. We'll live in that freedom right now. It's ours right now. But we just, again, have to realize it. And it's up to us how much time that will take. But we will get there if we keep trying. Another story that comes to mind on humility is there was a nun in SRF long ago. And someone was playing some, I don't know if it was the organ or a chant or something. And she said, oh, there's something wrong, with how you're playing that chant. And the person playing it said, are you sure? And she said, oh yes, I'm sure. My ear tells me. And I think she put more emphasis, my ear tells me. And Swamiji said right then he knew that particular nun had just a little bit too much ego. And he said soon after that little incident that she left her calling as a nun and went back to the world. And so Swamiji kind of knew that would happen simply by that one sentence that she said, my ear tells me. And Swamiji said that had she just said, oh, why can't you listen sensitive? Not even that, but listen sensitively, and you'll hear that something's a little off. Instead, she could have put it off on the other person and just asked them to listen sensitively. But by the way, she said, oh, I know. We have to watch ourselves on the spiritual path. Sometimes it seems like there's a game that we have in America called the cakewalk, and or musical chairs is the one I'm thinking of. And they turn on a music, and everybody's walking around in a circle with all of these chairs, and they remove one chair, and then they turn off the music, and everyone sits down, and then one person doesn't have a chair, and they're out. And then they'll turn back on the music again, everybody's walking around, and they take away a chair. It might seem like the spiritual path sometimes is like that, especially you stay on the path for a while. You see, okay, we're all in, we're going to go, oh, where'd that guy go? Oh, okay, I'm still in, okay, no. And it's even that thought, I'm still in, that's the danger, that we want to think, God, my heart is a hermitage, this bodily temple is yours, come in, God, that no matter what happens, God, I'm with you. And you're with me. And if you maintain that attitude, then nothing else matters, and you will be successful on the spiritual path. So now, as I was reading this chapter on humility and preparing for this talk, Swamiji was talking about two different ways that we can try to transcend the ego. One he called is self-effacing or self-effacement. And my gosh, I've been reading this book since it was published in 2005, and I always just assumed self-effacement meant something like just kind of being negative on yourself or just pushing the ego down. And I actually Googled it today, which is a very simple, easy thing to do, and found that it means self-effacement of not letting the energy come back to yourself, of just kind of pushing yourself gently out of the way and not letting anything come back to yourself. So one way is that, through self-effacement, that whatever, if someone says, oh, what a wonderful project you did, you can say something like, oh, it was a group effort and we all did it together. And then the other way is, so self-effacement, yes, and this is a contractive energy where you're just trying to more and more get yourself out of the way. It's like you just don't even want to be there. And then the other energy is an expansive energy. And these two energies, you'll meet different types of monks, different types of spiritual aspirants, and they will exhibit more of each one of these. That each one of us is different, each one of us is a mixture of these, and I'll get into that in a minute, but I want to clearly define these because one person might have a temperament and you tell him, hey, would you please give us a lecture on, Kriya Yoga or on Paramahansa Yogananda? There's 1,000 people showing up for this thing. And the person will say, okay. But if they're a true renunciate, and remember, I want to point this out again, that the only valid definition of renunciation is one who's renouncing the ego. So if they're a true renunciate, they'll say, sure, I'll give the talk to the 1,000 people. But inside they're thinking, Master, you have to do this through me, that you're going to be speaking through me, that person may even try to feel themselves in each member of the audience and feel really it's just God talking to God, God uplifting God. But you might ask someone else, hey, would you like to give a talk to 1,000 people? Oh, God, no, not me. Please ask anybody else, but no, I'll just go into my room quietly and meditate. I'll find God that way. And conversely, you might ask someone, oh, what if, we just put you off in your room for a month and we'll bring you food every day and you don't talk to anyone, you'll be cloistered. And for some person, you might think, thank God. Finally, this organization is letting me be a true monk. And somebody else might think, oh God, that's going to be the end of me. I'll go crazy in there. And I want to bring these two different types of energy actually to our real present day reality here in this ashram, that we have a guest retreat here. Right now we might have 20 guests down there. And to ask one monk to go down and talk to all the guests, he might think, great, an opportunity. I can share what I've learned on the spiritual path with all of these wonderful souls, and if they have any questions, I'm happy to help them, God serving God. And it might be very expensive for him. And for someone else who's more of the contractive type, trying to find God more on the inside, you might ask him to do that, and he might think, oh, please, no, that I might get washed away by the tide of delusion and all of these people going hither-thither in all of these directions. And it must be pointed out that each individual is fine, that each one is doing and finding God in their own way. And it's very important on the spiritual path, and especially in this age that we're living in the confusion in modern times of the past way of doing things as being renunciates, that we have to learn to see each renunciate as an individual and see each person and look for what is good for them and how are they approaching the spiritual path, how are they going towards God. And then the other important aspect of this is that each one of us is a mixture of these two qualities, and that we have to find our own balance. We have to find our own balance in mixing with others, in serving others, in meditating with others. Sometimes we'll need to meditate on our own. Sometimes we have to get in tune with God and be able to ask God at any given moment, what is it that you want me to do today, God? There's two more things that I want to mention here, and then I'll wrap up. One of those is a dear friend of mine who's a Virgo. He said when he first came on the spiritual path that he loved to make lists, and he would just see, by the end of the day, I got 9 out of these 10 things done, 90%. I'm doing great, my Seva, great for God. But he, sometimes he wouldn't get all the things done, and as he grew spiritually, he started realizing that it really wasn't about those lists and how much outwardly he accomplished. It was more about how much was he listening to God all day. And he stopped making the lists, and he started saying, God, what do you want me to do right now? And he would inwardly listen. And he says that as he did that, he started to grow, number one, much more spiritually. But number two, he got much more done because he was acting from his own calm center, and he was able to do the right thing in every moment at the right time with the power and concentration of God. Anyways, something that you might try on your own. And then as we do that, we begin to understand that life really is a flow. And so many of us, we still have a Kali Yuga consciousness that we know is not Kali Yuga, but we still think that, oh, I'm going to, once I do this, this, and this, once I do this number of Kriyas, or once I do an hour and a half in the morning of sadhana and an hour and a half in the evening, then I'll be there. Then freedom will be mine. And as we grow, we realize it's good to do these, obviously. I'm not saying that we shouldn't set goals even in sadhana or whatever and try to achieve them. But as we grow spiritually and as we are on the path for a long time, we'll realize that there's actually no goal that we can set that then, finally, I'm there. Because God's always with us. He's there right now. And we realize that the spiritual life, it's a process of growing. And it's always growing. One way of looking at it is that Master said, you go on until you achieve endlessness. And I want to end with this point that the ego, we can never annihilate it. Because we start to think, okay, we're talking about this contractive way of doing things, which the hand should have gone that way, or this expansive way of doing things. And so we think, okay, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to do battle with this ego, and I'm going to get that guy. But you know what? The ego can never be annihilated, ever. That the ego actually is, in its truest state, omnipresent and eternal. And so we have to learn how to transcend the ego. And here's the point that Swamiji makes, that Master makes, for us to understand this deeply. It's that once, and you will, one day you're going to become a Jesus Christ, Paramahansa Yogananda, a whoever, that once you do that and you play your little role on the earth, and then you go back into infinity and you leave your little body, that if devotees sincerely call you back when they pray and say, please, God, we would like you back in this form, that you will be called back as that personality. And now, when I first heard that, I thought, bummer, does this thing ever end? That even you make it all the, I'm just trying to become a Jiva Mukta here, but even you make it all the way, you do all your work, you become an avatar, and they call you back to suffer, come down here some more and suffer. But first of all, that's wrong logic. That once you become an avatar, even when you get called back, you're not suffering. You're always in a state of bliss, and nothing can make you suffer. That you've understood the game, that it's all God, that it's all joy, and you live in that state of eternal joy. But then, that's not looking at it quite right, that you're going to become back and be in suffering. But then the highest point of looking at it is that you're not coming back at all. That you realize your oneness with God, and it's God returning back. But it is fascinating that God manifests that same personality again. And what this means is that life is eternal. What it means is that you are eternal, that even your ego is eternal. And even in this incarnation, should you, and I hope that you do, become a Jivan Mukta in this incarnation, that little ego that says, I am Bobby, or I am Vivek, or whoever, exists eternally. And so even when you merge into that ocean, that memory of being Vivek or of being Bobby remains eternally. And so think about these things, because as we think about them, as we meditate on these stories that the masters tell, it helps us to understand that life is eternal, that we are eternal, that what we're trying to achieve is more, it's not a static, I'm here today, I'm there tomorrow. It's more that we are achieving this endlessness, that we're achieving a state of consciousness, we're achieving a state of realization that we are eternal, and more than just being eternal, that we are eternal bliss. So I look forward to our next satsang next week, and I look forward to meditating with everyone in the entire universe in that bliss. Joy to you.